Hi guys, and welcome back to day 2 of my 7-day loose floral challenge. This free challenge teaches you everything you need to know about painting loose florals in watercolour in just 1 week. There will be a new video every day on my YouTube channel, and you can share your work in the free Facebook group as well. All the links are in the description. Okay, so for day 1 we looked at some basic watercolour techniques and we created some daisies. For day 2 we're going to be focusing on anemones. These are beautiful flowers and much easier to paint than you might think. We're going to be focusing on 3 new things today. So we're going to be looking at how to use detail to create a focal point. We're also going to be looking at simple composition for single flower stems. We're also going to be looking at some basic colour mixing to create variations and interest in the petals and leaves. Let's get started. Alright guys, now we're ready to start painting. Now for the supplies I'm going to be using the same ones throughout this class, so Stonehenge Aqua Cold Press by Legion paper, 100% cotton, in the block, my Winsor & Newton professional paints and my Princeton Heritage 4050 round brushes. So for day 2 we're going to be doing an anemone flower, so we're going to be building on some of the techniques we learnt yesterday to look at things like doing bigger petals, creating variations in colour and value, but the main thing we're going to focus on is creating a focal point with the centre of the flower, and anemones are great for this. So we're going to use a 2/3 composition, so we're going to divide the page into 3. We're going to put the centre of the flower in the top third and then the leaves and stems in the bottom third. So for the anemone centres I'm going to use a mix of black and Payne's grey. I really like putting sort of blue tones into the black to make them look a little bit more 3-dimensional, otherwise they can look a bit flat and artificial. So we're going to mix this up to a nice dark colour. You want a relatively thick mix on your brush, and then we're going to create the circle there at the kind of 2/3 line. So we want a solid circle to start with, it doesn't need to be perfect. And then we're going to get some of that colour off and just focus the paint on the tip of the brush. And then we're going to essentially flick out almost like eyelashes. So flicking out like that, you want them to be thicker at the base and thinner at the top. And then what we're going to do to make sure this looks full is vary the direction, the curve, the length, just to make sure that it looks nice and full. You don't want kind of a few just stuck out on their own. It needs to look nice and bushy. So you can see sometimes I'm going in, sometimes I'm coming out. They're facing slightly different directions, curving and changing the length of them there as well. Okay. Alright, and then we're going to get a bit more colour and use the tip of the brush and do dots. Now we don't want to worry about joining the dots to the stamen, we're just going to create a ring of dots around the edge, and this is where the detail will be. So this is going to be the focal point of the image. One of the things you want to bear in mind with loose florals is that you need a clear focal point, otherwise the images will just start to look a little bit kind of too loose and too expressive. It won't have a clear thing for people to look at, it won't have a clear subject. So we create a ring of dots like that. Alright, and that's the centres done. Now for the petals I'm going to use a mixture of opera rose, so a pink colour, and this is a dioxazine purple, to create a kind of mauve, I don't know how to pronounce that actually, kind of pinky purple colour. So what we want to do is make sure that we've got the paint on the tip of the brush, and then I'm going to create some flicky lines up here. And that creates a kind of intricate detail on the petal that is closest to the centre. And we're going to add some more water, press the brush flat, and then pull that up into a petal shape. And what we're going to have then is this detail that's kind of drawing the eye towards the centre of the flower. Add plenty more colour onto that, and you can see it's almost like a hot air balloon shape. We want it to be narrower at the base and then kind of spread out to a rounded top. And it doesn't need to be perfectly round. I'm going to create some different outlines as we go. Okay, I'm going to add a little more pink there and then do another one here. So we create the flicky internal bits and then add more water and press the brush around. And this one I'm going to create a sort of heart shape at the top. Like that, there we go. And then we're going to add a bit more darker paint there on the inside edge. You can also put that around the top edge as well for a bit of a shadow. I'm going to come back in with a bit more purple, maybe a bit dark, and then just darken some of these as well. All right then, you can see what I'm doing each time here is slightly changing the colour mix that we're using. Now, the idea behind this is to create variation in the colour, in the value, in the lightness or darkness of it, because that's what keeps it interesting and makes it look natural. Now, if you use exactly the same colour for all of these petals, it's going to look very flat, and it's just not going to look realistic. Not realistic as in, you know, it's lifelike, but it's just not going to look like a real flower. It's going to look two-dimensional. So we're going to go very pink again here. I'll just add a bit darker down there. You can also see that I'm not touching these petals together. One of the reasons for that is because they're really big petals, and so they tend to kind of all blend into one and get a bit blobby if you do that. You touch them too much. So I'm keeping them quite separate, creating uneven edges there. They're not symmetrical. I'm going to add some more purple here. This is all getting a bit pink. This one, I'm going to aim for 6 petals. Anemones actually have quite a lot of petals. They tend to have kind of 2 layers. But what we do with loose florals is really try and simplify the flower to just its essence. And because anemones have this really strong, famous center, that's what we're focusing on, and the petals almost become, you know, a way to direct your eye to that center. Clear up a bit of a puddle there. I'm careful not to use Opera Rose on its own. One of the reasons is that it can come off a bit neon if you use it just on its own, so I like to mix it with other colours. I'll do this last one here. There we go, give it a little wiggle at that bottom edge. And then we're going to add a bit of contrast in as well. This one was very pink here, so I'm adding some purple. The idea is that you're doing things that are just slightly different all the time. So there's some purple there to contrast. This one has a round edge, so this one has a jagged edge. This one has a heart-shaped edge. This one is purple, so this one is pink. This one is darker, so this one is lighter. The idea is that every time you're just changing one small detail about what you're working on. And that means that it never ends up looking like it's all the same, and you create lots of interest in different things that draw your eye. Now that is the flower part finished. Okay, so moving on to the stems and leaves, we're going to use sap green as the base. It's my favourite green for florals. But what I'm going to add is a little bit of blue, and the reason for that is that this purple is a slightly blue purple. And so if we mimic that in the leaves as well, it will look a lot more unified. So we'll add plenty of cobalt blue there as well. Okay, then we're going to do the same technique for stems. So we're going to imagine that it's coming from the center and then pull down and then curve it. And then for these leaves, we're going to use the same technique that we did yesterday, but add a stem with some leaves on it. So pull a stem out there, and then I'm going to add a little bit more water. And then pull out the curved leaf shape with the highlight in the middle. Now what we're going to do as we go through this is keep adding contrast and variation in the leaves. So I quite like to go back in with a darker pigment and drop that in. I'm also going to use a lighter value with a bit more water. And then what we're going to do is just pull this out to touch there and allow that paint to start to spread. And we're going to change up the colour, so this time we're going to add some blue and pull that out. And you can see that it's just a case of constantly changing just one small thing about what you're doing. Add some more blue and pull this one down. And then go back in the base with a darker tone. Okay, and then so we don't create something that's too symmetrical, we're going to pull the leaves out at a slightly different angle. So we're not going to start from here, but we're going to come down a bit and then start from there. To add a nice dark one at the start. There we go. You can use quite a few strokes to get the shape if you want. I'm doing this on a weird angle just so you can see it from the camera. And then because this one is a lighter value, I'm going to pull a darker value on the opposite side so that they don't start to mirror. A lot more cobalt blue in it. And then we're going to have the final leaf that's coming down here in a lighter value. A lot more water. And what I'm going to do is pull it down as if it's being pulled down by gravity. Curve down and fill that space. I'm just going to point back to where it started growing. There we go. Perfect. Okay, we can go back in and add some more darker colours to the base if needed, just to make sure we've got a real mix of values in there. Okay, so this looks really good. We've got our focal point there where all of the petals are kind of pointing into the centre and drawing your eye, and then you've got a stem and leaves that kind of fill this space and allow your eye to spread out and round and back to the centre. Okay, so that's it. Now we've got a beautiful anemone painting as well. So to recap, in day 2, we've learned how to use details to create a focal point with that centre detail and all those little stamen. We've also looked at some basic 2/3 composition rules that we can use for single flower stems, and we've looked at some colour mixing to create variations and interest in those petals and leaves. Don't forget to share your work in the Facebook group. We'd love to see what you create. And come back tomorrow for day 3.